In the quiet hills of Bethlehem, far from the noise of the village, a young boy named David spent his days watching sheep. The wind moved softly through the grass, and the sky stretched wide and blue above him. While others spoke loudly in the marketplace and dreamed of honor, David sat alone with a shepherd's staff in his hand and a harp resting on his knees. David was the youngest son in his family. His older brothers were strong and tall. People noticed them. They were praised for their looks and their skills. David, however, was rarely mentioned. When meals were shared or stories were told, he was often outside, guiding sheep from danger, counting them one by one as the sun began to set. But David did not feel lonely. As the sheep grazed, David lifted his eyes toward the heavens. "God," he whispered, "you are with me here." His voice was gentle, but his faith was deep. He sang songs that came straight from his heart, songs of trust, songs of praise, songs of love. His music flowed through the fields like a quiet prayer. "The Lord is my shepherd," David sang softly one evening, his fingers moving across the harp strings. "I lack nothing." The words filled him with peace. He believed them with all his heart. Life in the fields was not always calm. One night, a lion crept toward the flock, its eyes glowing in the darkness. The sheep scattered in fear. David's heart beat fast, but he did not run away. He grabbed his staff and whispered, "Lord, help me." With courage that surprised even him, David chased the lion away and saved the lamb it tried to steal. Another time, a bear attacked. Again, David stood his ground, not because he was strong, but because he trusted God. "You delivered me before," he prayed, "and you will do it again." When the danger passed, David sat under the stars, shaking but thankful. He looked up and smiled. "Thank you, God," he said quietly. In those moments, David learned something important. God was not far away. God was close. God saw him. While David's brothers trained for war and spoke of big dreams, David learned to listen. In the silence of the fields, his heart grew soft toward God. He talked to him about everything, his fears, his hopes, his joy. God was not just someone David knew about. God was someone David loved. People did not see this. They saw only a boy with dusty feet and simple clothes. But God saw more. God saw a heart that trusted him completely, a heart that would sing in peace and stand firm in danger, a heart that belonged fully to him. And though no one else knew it yet, God was already shaping David's story, right there in the quiet fields among the sheep. The morning sun had barely risen when the prophet Samuel began his journey to Bethlehem. His steps were slow and thoughtful, his heart heavy with God's words. Israel's first king had failed to obey the Lord, and God had spoken clearly, "I have found a man after my own heart." Samuel did not yet know who that man was, but he trusted God's voice. When Samuel arrived in Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled. "Do you come in peace?" they asked, afraid that God's prophet had come with a message of judgment. "I come in peace," Samuel replied gently. "Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice." Then his eyes turned toward the house of Jesse. One by one, Jesse's sons were called forward. The first was Eliab. He stood tall and strong, his shoulders broad, his face confident. Samuel looked at him and thought, "Surely this is the Lord's chosen one." But God spoke quietly to Samuel's heart. "Do not consider his appearance or his height. I have rejected him." Another son stepped forward. Then another. Each looked impressive. Each seemed worthy in the eyes of men. But every time God said the same thing, "Not this one." Samuel's brows furrowed. He turned to Jesse and asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse hesitated. "There is still the youngest," he said slowly, "but he is keeping the sheep, keeping the sheep." David was not even invited. Samuel straightened and said firmly, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he comes." Far away in the fields, David was guiding his flock toward water when a servant came running. "David," he called, "you are needed at home. The prophet is waiting." David was surprised. "The prophet? For me?" He wiped the dust from his hands and hurried back, his heart beating fast with curiosity. When David entered the house, the room fell quiet. His hair was sun-lightened, his clothes simple. He did not look like a king. But the moment Samuel saw him, God's voice was clear and strong. "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." Without hesitation, Samuel took the horn of oil and poured it over David's head. The oil ran down his hair and onto his clothes. In that moment, something unseen but powerful happened. The Spirit of the Lord came upon David with great strength. David felt it deep inside, a warmth, a peace, a calling he could not yet explain. He looked around the room, confused and humbled. His brothers stared in shock. No one spoke. Samuel prayed and blessed David, then quietly left. And just like that, it was over. No crown, no throne, no celebration. That same evening, David returned to the fields. He picked up his shepherd's staff and guided the sheep as he always had. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. He was still the youngest son, still a shepherd, still unnoticed by the world. But inside, everything was different. David now carried a promise from God. He did not know when it would be fulfilled or how, but he trusted the one who had chosen him. As the sun set and the stars appeared, David lifted his voice in song once more, not as a forgotten boy, but as someone known and chosen by God. Though his life looked the same on the outside, heaven had marked him forever. The valley of Elah echoed with fear. Two armies stood on opposite hills, the Philistines on one side and the army of Israel on the other. Every morning and every evening, a loud and terrifying voice thundered across the valley. "I defy the armies of Israel today," the giant roared. "Send me a man to fight me." His name was Goliath. He stood taller than any man Israel had ever seen. His armor shone in the sun, heavy and strong. His spear was thick like a weaver's rod, and his voice shook the ground beneath him. When the soldiers of Israel heard him, their hearts melted with fear. Even King Saul, tall and armed for battle, trembled. For 40 days, no one moved. One morning, David arrived at the camp with food for his brothers. His father Jesse had sent him to check on them. As David greeted the soldiers, he heard Goliath's voice again, loud and proud. David stopped. His eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with concern. "Who is this Philistine?" David asked, "that he should mock the living God?" The men around him whispered nervously. "You don't understand," one said. "He has defeated everyone. No one can stand against him." David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard him speaking and grew angry. "Why have you come here?" Eliab snapped. "Who did you leave those few sheep with? You just want to see the battle." David looked at him calmly. "Is there not a cause?" he replied. Word of David's questions reached King Saul, and David was brought before him. The king looked at the young shepherd and sighed. "You are not able to fight this Philistine," Saul said gently. "You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." David lifted his head. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," he said. "When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb, I went after it. The Lord who rescued me from the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine too." Saul saw something in David's eyes, faith without fear. "Go," he said at last, "and may the Lord be with you." Saul tried to dress David in armor, but it was too heavy. David could barely walk. He shook his head. "I cannot go with these," he said. He removed the armor and stepped away. Instead, David walked down to the stream. He knelt and picked up 5 smooth stones, placing them carefully in his pouch. In his hand, he held only a sling. When Goliath saw David coming, he laughed. "Am I a dog," he sneered, "that you come at me with sticks?" David stopped and looked up at the giant. His voice was steady and strong. "You come against me with sword and spear," he said, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today, the battle belongs to the Lord." The giant charged. David ran forward, placed a stone in his sling, and swung it with all his strength. The stone flew through the air and struck Goliath on the forehead. The giant stumbled, then fell face first to the ground. Silence filled the valley. Then the army of Israel erupted with shouts of victory. David stood still, breathing hard, his heart full of awe. It was not his strength that had won the battle. It was his faith in God. After David defeated Goliath, his name spread through Israel like fire. Women sang in the streets, "Saul has killed his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." At first, King Saul smiled, but soon, those words began to trouble him. Jealousy crept into Saul's heart like a dark shadow. "David will take my throne," Saul muttered to himself. From that day on, Saul's love for David turned into fear, and then into hatred. More than once, Saul tried to kill him. David was forced to flee, leaving behind his home, his wife, and the life he once knew. He hid in caves, wandered through deserts, and slept under open skies. Yet even as he ran, David did not stop trusting God. One night, David and his men took shelter deep inside a dark cave. The air was cold, and the only sound was the soft breathing of weary soldiers. Suddenly, footsteps echoed at the cave's entrance. A man stepped inside, alone. It was King Saul. Saul had no idea David was there. He laid his spear aside and rested in the cave, completely unguarded. David's men froze. Then they whispered urgently, "This is the day the Lord spoke of. God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Kill him now." David crept forward, his heart pounding. He was close enough to strike, close enough to end years of fear and running, close enough to claim what God had promised him. But as David looked at Saul, something stopped him. Quietly, he reached out and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. The sound of tearing cloth echoed softly in the cave. Saul did not notice. As Saul left the cave, David's heart suddenly felt heavy. He turned to his men. "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master," he said. "He is the Lord's anointed." David stepped out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord the king." Saul turned, shocked to see David standing there. David bowed low and held up the piece of cloth. "Why do you listen to those who say I want to harm you?" David asked. "Today, the Lord delivered you into my hands, but I would not lay a hand on you. May the Lord judge between you and me." Saul's eyes filled with tears. His voice trembled. "You are more righteous than I," Saul said. "You have treated me well, even though I treated you badly." For a moment, peace stood between them. David returned to the wilderness, still hunted, still waiting. Choosing mercy did not remove his suffering, but it proved something deeper. David trusted God's timing more than his own desires. In the darkness of the wilderness, David learned that true strength is not found in revenge, but in obedience. David was now king of Israel. The crown rested on his head, and the people looked to him for guidance. God had given him victory, honor, and peace on every side. From the outside, David's life looked strong and secure. But one quiet evening, when he should have been leading his army into battle, David stayed behind in Jerusalem, and that choice opened the door to great sin. As the sun set, David walked alone on the roof of his palace. Below him, the city was calm. Then his eyes fell on a woman bathing. She was beautiful. David stared longer than he should have. Instead of turning away, he called for her. Her name was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, one of David's loyal soldiers. David knew what was right, yet he ignored the voice in his heart. One sin led to another. When Bathsheba became pregnant, fear filled David. He tried to hide what he had done. He called Uriah home from battle, hoping the truth would disappear. But Uriah refused to enjoy comfort while his fellow soldiers fought. David's plan failed. Desperate, David made a terrible decision. He sent Uriah back to the front lines with a letter, one that sealed his own death. Uriah was killed in battle. David took Bathsheba as his wife, and for a moment it seemed the secret was safe. But God saw everything. Time passed, and the joy David once knew slowly faded. His songs grew quiet. His heart felt heavy. Though he sat on a throne, guilt followed him like a shadow. Then God sent the prophet Nathan. Nathan did not accuse David right away. Instead, he told a story. There were two men, Nathan said, one rich and one poor. The rich man had many sheep, but the poor man had only one lamb. When a traveler came, the rich man took the poor man's lamb and killed it. David's anger burned. "That man deserves to die," he declared. Nathan looked directly into David's eyes and said, "You are the man." The words struck David like a sword. In that moment, his excuses fell apart. His power, his title, his pride, none of it could protect him. David's shoulders sank, and his voice broke. "I have sinned against the Lord," David whispered. There was no blame, no defense, only truth. David fell to his knees. Tears filled his eyes as his heart finally broke before God. That night, he poured out his soul in prayer. "Have mercy on me, O God," David cried. "Create in me a clean heart. Do not take your spirit from me." He knew forgiveness would not erase the consequences of his actions, but he also knew God's mercy was greater than his failure. David did not hide anymore. He returned to God with humility and sorrow. This was why David was different. Not because he never failed, but because when he did, he ran back to God with a broken and honest heart. David's confession did not end his pain, but it opened the door to healing. God forgave him, just as he promised. Yet forgiveness did not remove all consequences. The child born to David and Bathsheba became sick, and David fasted and prayed with all his heart. He lay on the ground, weeping, hoping for mercy. "Who knows?" David said softly. "The Lord may yet be gracious." When the child died, David rose, washed himself, and worshipped God. His servants were confused. "Why do you worship now?" they asked. David answered gently, "I cannot bring the child back, but I can still trust the Lord." In time, God comforted David and Bathsheba with another son, Solomon, and the Bible says the Lord loved him. It was a quiet reminder that God's grace had not left David's house. Though forgiven, David's life was never the same. Trouble arose within his family. His kingdom faced sorrow and division. Each hardship reminded David that sin leaves scars. Yet through every tear and trial, David did not walk away from God. He walked closer. In his weakest moments, David returned to prayer. In his darkest nights, he returned to worship. When enemies surrounded him, he remembered the God who had once helped a shepherd defeat a giant. When guilt whispered lies, David clung to God's mercy. Years passed. David grew older. His hair turned grey, his strength faded, but his heart remained soft toward God. He continued to write songs of praise, songs of sorrow, songs of hope. Through them, he taught future generations to trust the Lord. "The Lord is my shepherd," David wrote again, this time with a life full of memories behind the words. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." David knew now, more than ever, what those words meant. Long after David's death, the Apostle Paul spoke of him and said, "God found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do." David was not remembered as a perfect king. He was remembered as a man who loved God, a man who trusted God as a boy, honored him in battle, showed mercy when wronged, repented when he failed, and returned to God again and again. This was the true mark of David's heart, not perfection, but devotion. And that same God still looks at hearts today. Lessons from the story. God sees your heart, not your status. Just like David, you may feel small, overlooked, or unimportant. But God notices the love, faith, and courage hidden in your heart. Your value is not measured by what people see, but by what God knows. Faith can conquer giants. Life will throw giants your way. Fear, doubt, or impossible challenges. Like David, when you trust God instead of your own strength, you can overcome what seems unbeatable. Mercy is true strength. Holding grudges or seeking revenge may seem satisfying, but choosing mercy and leaving justice in God's hands shows true courage and character. Repentance brings freedom. Everyone makes mistakes, even the greatest of leaders. The difference is in admitting your wrongs and turning to God. A broken, repentant heart opens the door to forgiveness, healing, and growth. A heart after God's own heart. David wasn't perfect, but he never gave up on God. True greatness comes not from achievements or titles, but from loving God wholeheartedly, returning to Him when you fall, and trusting His plan. Look at your own heart. Are you seeking God in small moments? Are you trusting Him when life feels impossible? Are you willing to admit when you've gone wrong and turn back? Your heart matters to God more than anyone else's opinion. Today, flex on yourself, not because of what you've done, but because of the heart you choose to give to God. God saw David's heart, not his size or strength. God sees yours too. Show Him your heart today. Comment, "My heart is for God," and inspire others to trust Him. Hit like, share this video, and subscribe for more stories that grow your courage and faith.